Extreme heat is moving toward the northeast today, even as the Midwest remains extraordinarily hot. Heat records are expected to crumble as we approach Thursday's summer solstice. Nearly 200 daily high temperature records could be tied or broken in major cities, including Boston, D.C., Chicago, and New York City. Temperatures could reach as high as 25 degrees above normal in many areas. Firefighters are battling the Post Fire in California, which has burned more than 15,000 acres. Fire officials say they now have the fire 20% contained. In New Mexico, residents of Ruidoso were told to immediately flee as a wildfire there rapidly grew to consume more than 5,000 acres. President Joe Biden is expected to unveil a sweeping new policy today, lifting the threat of deportation for tens of thousands of immigrants married to U.S. citizens. Now, this will allow spouses of U.S. citizens to apply for a parole-in-place program, shielding them from deportations and offering them work permits for at least 10 years. And the Boston Celtics winning the NBA Finals, dismantling the Dallas Mavericks 4-1. Game 5's final score 106-88 in favor of the Celtics. The big win also netting the Celtics the most championship titles in NBA history with 18. So now here's a look at your weather on the ones.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Julie Marquez. The hot weather will be the big story for the Midwest and the Northeast. Columbus, 94 degrees today. Same thing in St. Louis. Chicago's 93. Parts of Maine in the 90s. But it's cooler in the Northwest, where we've had some snow in parts of Idaho and in Montana. Meanwhile, thunderstorms are breaking out from Minneapolis to Omaha. Some could be severe today.
Driscoll. Today is Tuesday, June 18th. Our top story, we are seeing dangerous heat across much of the nation. This map from the National Weather Service showing the heat risk with the red and magenta colors highlighting the highest potential of heat-related impacts. The heat is expected to advance towards the northeast today. In Chicago, heat indices could remain near or above 100 degrees through next week. Jenna Enoch reports.
Extreme heat alerts remain in effect for tens of millions of people as cities including Chicago break heat records. States in the Midwest started to bake Monday in the dangerous heat wave that was expected to stretch from Iowa to Maine into at least Friday. We're talking temperatures well into the 90s and with humidity feeling like low 100s.
We are in the path of extreme heat, bringing along potential health risks in the forthcoming days.
I usually bring a spray bottle, when I get hot, I just spray myself. And if it's
cities including Boston, D.C., Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New York City.
Extreme heat is the most dangerous weather phenomenon we have in New York City. We lose over 350 New Yorkers a year on average to heat.
In Maine, the northeasternmost state, it could hit their hottest temperature Wednesday with a forecast of 99 degrees. That's just 3 degrees higher than the state's all-time hottest high temp on record. In Boston, temperatures are expected to be near 100 degrees Thursday, and officials aren't just concerned about high temperatures, but how long they will stick around. Pittsburgh is forecast to see 6 consecutive days of temps above 95 degrees.
While very hot days are, of course, normal, the number and the duration of these hot days we are seeing each and every year is not. The risks to our planet presents risk here in New York City and across the United States.
Jenna Enoch, Spectrum News.
It is peak wildfire season out west, and one of the first major wildfires of the year has already scorched more than 15,000 acres in California. Our Terrelyn Wagner has more.
And there, get ready to evacuate.
With crews battling intense and fast-moving flames, residents south of the Post Fire have been put on alert, including those living in Paradise Ranch Estates.
If you move here, you got to expect it.
Pat Hornberger moved here over 30 years ago, and the Angeles National Forest is literally her backyard. She's seen quite a few fires in the area.
A lot. It's a lot.
So when the evacuation warning was issued, she began packing her bag and her cats, so she'll be ready to leave at a moment's notice.
Because you just never know, a spark and phew, it's gone.
Body shop and began traveling south, prompting the evacuation of over 1,000 people from Hungry Valley State Vehicular Recreation Area. It's only June, and Captain Sheila Kelleher Burko of Los Angeles County Fire says already things have been busy.
I think everybody needs to pay attention to how many starts we've had, especially up in the Antelope Valley over the last 3 weeks. It's pretty incredible. This is a big fire early in the season, so I think it's a real indicator of what we could be up against this season.
Early fires aren't just cropping up in the Antelope Valley. The last few days have seen roughly a dozen fires of various sizes erupt across the Southland. Among them, the Lisa Fire in Riverside, the Max Fire near Lancaster, the Hesperia Fire in San Bernardino, and the Tuscany Fire near Palm Springs. Section Chief Kenichi Haskett of LA County Fire says weather is playing a large role, particularly
April showers bring the May flowers, but June warmed up really quickly,
leaving behind a lot of dry fuel. Add to that strong winds and tough terrain, making this fire particularly difficult to fight.
You know, it's been super hot, super dry. Those hills that they're hiking, they're very steep. And when you combine the low humidity, the high heat with the wind, it just causes the perfect storm for a fire like this to take off.
Looking out over her favorite spot, Pat can see just how dry it is, but also says this is no longer a seasonal condition.
Not even summer, just like 24/7 all year long.
It's dry.
Yeah.
With that in mind, and the potential for a long fire season ahead, even if she doesn't have to leave this time, it may be a good idea to keep that go bag packed for a while. Tara Lynn Wagner, Spectrum News.
President Joe Biden making another major announcement on immigration. The change will lift the threat of deportation for tens of thousands of immigrants married to U.S. citizens. Spectrum's national reporter Angie Gonzalez has more.
President Joe Biden's latest action on immigration is an expansive effort that will allow roughly 500,000 undocumented immigrants an opportunity to work on a visa while they apply for permanent residency and eventually citizenship. To qualify for the Parole in Place program, applicants must be married to a U.S. citizen, have lived in the U.S. for more than 10 years, and made that union official before today. President Biden will make the official announcement during a White House event this afternoon, celebrating the 12-year anniversary of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, also known as DACA. That directive, issued while Biden was vice president, offered deportation protections for young, undocumented immigrants. His latest move as president is also their parent.
I believe that immigration has always been a lifeblood of America.
Today's news follows the president's executive action earlier this month, meant to stem illegal crossings at the southern border by restricting those who were eligible for asylum. Biden was criticized by some members of his own party for implementing policy that they had associated with his predecessor, former President Donald Trump. Republicans called the executive action too little, too late.
The chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus praised Biden's latest steps, but Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas did not, instead saying it's a huge magnet for would-be immigrants. In Washington, Angie Gonzalez, Spectrum News.
Coming up on our political buzz, analysis of President Biden's new immigration policy, plus a look ahead to the presidential debate next week.
Here's the deal. In this election year, people need a place to explore national issues that have an impact on their community. To understand those issues better, we're bringing together our team of local political journalists from across the country to break down what's happening. So join us every week to catch up on the key stories making a big difference across the nation and in your local community.
Watch The Big Deal with Errol Lewis Friday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Spectrum News Plus. Available on all of your favorite devices exclusively on Spectrum.
At Spectrum, we know how much you depend on the reliability of our products and services. Now, we've taken a new step forward in reliability by identifying potential service issues before they become a problem. If you're affected, we'll contact you and help schedule a free service appointment with one of our expert technicians. The proactive maintenance of our network is one of the many reasons Spectrum delivers the most. Spectrum, keeping you connected.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I found hope in the midst of an overwhelming situation.
Alcoholism is a disease that can affect any family. Everyone suffers, but there is help and hope at Al-Anon Family Groups.
Al-Anon gave me my life back. I'm a better father and husband.
Are you in an overwhelming situation because of someone else's drinking? Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Local and virtual meetings are available. Maybe one could work for you. Call 33 or visit alanon.org/hope.
Well, it's going to be a hot week for millions of people across the country. Hi there, I'm meteorologist Robert Santos. Now, the heat will be particularly intense for the Midwest all the way up into the Northeast. We're talking about extreme heat there, so it's going to be very dangerous all week. So make sure you're taking precautions if you live in those areas or will be traveling to those areas. In the meantime, heavy rain and storms, we'll be tracking across the plains and even the Gulf Coast. There'll be a plume of moisture coming up from the south and fire danger in the west. That's where we're seeing some red flag warnings in effect across the southwest, but also across central and northern California, as conditions are drying up there and there's some winds blowing with them. And these are alerts all related to the heat, as you can see, from the Great Lakes to the Ohio Valley all the way out to the Northeast. So make sure you find a cool zone in those areas if you do not have adequate air conditioning. So some of these temperatures in these areas will be 10 to 16 to 19, even 20 degrees above average up in the Northeast. Now, we talked about heat already in these areas earlier in the month and even just a couple or a week or two ago. But temperatures only got up into the 80s this time around. Look at all these 90s in Boston and Columbus, in Milwaukee and St. Louis. And it's all because of a building ridge of high pressure here. It's just going to stick around all week long. For many, it's not until the weekend that you'll finally get some drop in temperature. So take a look. Columbus, Ohio, 83 is your average, 10, 15, 18 degrees above average all the way through Saturday, then back down into the 80s Sunday and Monday. New York, 80s and 90s on the way, so hot for you as well. You're back into you're going to be right around average for tomorrow. And temperatures do warm up a little bit more, but you're not as hot there compared to other places. Look at Las Vegas, triple digits. It is that time of year we get more of it. But Saturday, Sunday, we're talking about a heat of 110 degrees in those areas.
Well, if you're just joining us or heading out the door, here's a look at what you need to know. Extreme heat is moving towards the Northeast today, even as the Midwest remains extraordinarily hot. Heat records are expected to crumble. Firefighters are battling the post-fire in California, which has burned more than 15,000 acres. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, residents of Ruidoso told to immediately flee as a wildfire there rapidly grew to consume more than 5,000 acres. And the Boston Celtics winning the NBA Finals 4-1. Game 5's final score 106-88 in favor of the Celtics. And that's a look at what you need to know this morning. It's time now for our political buzz. Our Bob Hart joins us now. Bob, President Biden will announce this new immigration policy today, changing deportation rules for about 500,000 immigrants married to U.S. citizens. Now, this is in contrast to his sweeping executive action limiting the asylum process at the U.S. southern border. Bob, how should we interpret this?
Well, I'm interpreting it as a way for President Biden to try to quiet immigration advocates who are very upset with him about his executive order, basically sealing the border when a certain number of people cross it. So I think this is to try to quiet.
And it's really focusing on one sector of immigrants as well. Meanwhile, President Biden releasing a new campaign ad. Let's take a little bit of a listen to that.
He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working.
And former President Trump already responding to this ad, saying in part after Biden's failing campaign spent nearly $80 million in media buys, he continues to plummet in the polls. What do you think of this strategy of Biden's here?
Well, leading up into the presidential debate, this is clearly a bell that the Biden team wants to ring loudly. And a lot of voters, as we've been talking about, Bree, already have baked-in opinions about Joe Biden and baked-in opinions about Donald Trump. There is a question of, are there any voters who are being swayed by in a very tight race that could matter?
And you mentioned the first presidential debate is next week. I can't believe we're already here. What can we expect to see in the days leading up to the debate?
I think both Trump and Biden will be off the trail a little bit soon because they really need to prepare for this. This is the earliest televised presidential debate in United States history by a long shot. And so what you're really going to be getting is a sort of fired up Joe Biden and a fired up Donald Trump. But one thing you won't be getting is hearing them interrupt each other because CNN is cutting off the mics except when the individual candidate is talking. And this is very different than in past presidential debates.
Yeah, because before we had different rules by a different committee. Now both sides have agreed not to go through this committee this time around.
Yeah, this is a CNN sort of going it alone with the presidential candidates before the Commission on Presidential Debate, the case, at least for this debate. And so that's why we're seeing a debate in June. The earliest before that was in 1980. We saw one on September 21st. So that's how early this presidential debate is since they've been regular part of the presidential campaign cycle since 1976.
All right, Bob Hart, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bree.
A federal judge temporarily blocking the Biden administration's new Title IX rule in 6 more states, including Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee. The rule is set to begin in August and expands Title IX civil rights protections to LGBTQ+ students. This ruling comes days after a different federal judge temporarily blocked the rule from taking effect in 4 states. More than 20 Republican-led states filed several lawsuits challenging President Biden's new policy. South Korean troops firing warning shots to repel North say they believe the northern troops unintentionally crossed the border while carrying out construction activities. The intrusions come amid heightened tensions between the two rivals, with the north floating waste-filled balloons south and the south restarting loudspeaker broadcasts towards the north. The two nations remain locked in conflict, the Korean War of the 1950s ending with an armistice, not a peace treaty. More news from the Korean Peninsula, with Russian President Vladimir Putin heading to Pyongyang for a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, his first trip to the isolated nation in 24 years. Putin seeking to shore up alternative sources of support in Russia's war against Ukraine in the face of heavy economic sanctions spearheaded by the U.S. Military and economic cooperation between the two nations has sharply increased since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022. Coming up on Spectrum News, the Boston Celtics are NBA champions again. We'll have them coming right up.
Spectrum News Plus. News from a new perspective, dedicated to refreshing storytelling and empowering communities across the nation. With balanced reporting, providing real context and in-depth coverage 24 hours a day.
Here's a look at your forecast across the country.
Local stories, connecting communities. We are Spectrum News Plus. Streaming now on the Spectrum News app and free with your Spectrum subscription.
I don't remember how it started.
Talk to Dad.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
Tell you.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
am meteorologist Julie Marquez. We have something to talk about in the tropics. It's the area we've been monitoring, and we have the potential of a tropical storm to form here. The first name on the list is Alberto. Not Alberto yet, but as this gets better organized and moves toward Mexico, it's going to bring tropical storm force winds and heavy rain to Mexico and for parts of Texas. This morning, it's expected to get better organized, become Tropical Storm Alberto, moving north now, but it will be moving westward and then making landfall sometime Wednesday night or Thursday morning. Now in parts of Texas, south of Port O'Connor, new information for you this morning is there is a tropical storm warning. Tropical storm force winds are expected here, and that would include some areas like Corpus Christi, Texas. Something to watch, be ready for in the days ahead. In addition to that, and the potential of about 2-3 feet of storm surge, we also have significant flooding possible. And where you see this red shading here, a moderate flooding risk because there's going to be so much rain in the days ahead. So when you look at the rainfall forecast, you can see some areas getting a good 5-10 inches of rain. Some areas could get over area. Now another area we're watching is in the Atlantic. It's east of the Bahamas. This one has a low chance of development, but an area of low pressure will try to form and then work its way toward the southeast coast by about the end of the week. So that's something that we will have to monitor. We're also monitoring today the risk of severe weather. It's a level 2 out of 5 from parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota and southward all the way to about Kansas. But we have the College World Series taking place in Omaha. We do have to watch for some severe storms today. Damaging wind, hail, even isolated tornadoes possible. That would include places like Lincoln and Omaha, Nebraska, Minneapolis too, and some stronger winds are possible with some thunderstorms today in parts of Ohio and into parts of New York. So that's an area that needs to be monitored. We can see this cold front here and the showers and storms that are breaking out.
French soccer superstar Kylian Mbappe suffering a nasty facial injury during his nation's 1-0 victory over Austria in the Euros last night. The striker needing treatment and appearing bloodied after an aerial collision with an Austrian player late in the game. The Austrian goalkeeper immediately signaling for staff to come onto the field for medical assistance. The injury puts Mbappe's continued participation in the tournament in doubt. He later posted on social media hinting he may need some form of facial protection when he returns to the game. The Boston Celtics are NBA champions after defeating the Dallas Mavericks 106-88 in Game 5 of the finals. The Celtics clinching its 18th title, the most in NBA. Jaylen Brown named the most valuable player, and Peyton Pritchard making his impact by swishing a 49-foot three-pointer, the longest made shot in the finals in the past 25 years. For some kids, a look up at the sky brings dreams of flying. One program in Kentucky looks to turn those dreams into a reality. Our Jordan Grants has a closer look.
Eyes on the sky. About 25 incoming 7th graders are exploring the ins and outs of aviation. Tyler Ferguson has had a fascination for planes since he was 6. Though he hasn't flown on a plane, he is getting an inside look at the aviation field and how different aircrafts work.
I think it's really interesting how the planes really work. And I really love the design of planes, and I think they look really cool.
Equus Flight Academy works to educate students about the many careers who are employed in the air transportation industry in May 2022. Over 250,000 jobs were filled for air transportation support positions.
We want the students and our scholars to know that those careers, that those positions are just as important as the pilot that's flying that aircraft.
The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics also reports that in 2023, less than 4% of employed aircraft pilots and flight engineers identify as Black or African American. Barty says their goal is to show students from all backgrounds that there is space for them in the aviation industry.
Then they now have a choice versus we making a choice for them with the lack of knowledge. You can't be what you can't see.
Tyler, a Conway middle schooler, says he wants to go into the Air Force. He says he has enjoyed learning more about one of his passions.
It was going to be an opportunity for me to learn more about planes and to get to know some people who have been on planes and some people who are experienced. So it was a
Gaining hands-on experience in aviation and learning that the sky is the limit. Reporting in Louisville, Jordan Grant, Spectrum News.
Setting some lofty goals there. I'm Bree Driscoll. Thanks so much for watching. Your Spectrum News in 90 is coming up right after this short break. Stay with us.
The 2024 election will decide who leads our nation and the balance of power in Congress, impacting all of us. From Capitol Hill to the Oval Office, let Spectrum News be your resource for balancing your community. That's our mission. Available on all of your favorite devices, exclusively on Spectrum.
At Spectrum, our workforce of over 100,000 employees are all located right here in the U.S. You can find them in our stores, in the field, and in our call centers with 100% U.S.-based customer service. Our team works hard to provide the towns, cities, and neighborhoods they live in with the reliable services that everyone counts on, making us one of America's most trusted companies. We're Spectrum, creating jobs and opportunities across the country, and proud to be 100% U.S.-based.
When I never graduated from high school, I realized I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work these back-breaking jobs the rest of my life. With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed to come back to school. I felt take on whatever challenges life throws at you.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
My mother was always very familiar with her neighborhood, but one day she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. And she didn't know whether she should go forward or turn, and she wasn't even really sure where she was at. It was very unsettling for her.
I felt so much better after my son told me, "Mom, I don't want you to worry or be afraid. I'll be there for you and we'll figure it out."